She beat me with a leather belt for taking 15-minute lunch breaks and sent Child Protective Services after my dad while plotting to steal custody of me. I was 14 years old, trying to navigate high school in suburban Denver when she entered our lives, and I never imagined that my response would be to weaponize her own twisted rules against her, recording everything that would eventually lead to her complete downfall in one explosive courtroom revelation that changed everything. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how I survived my stepmother Margaret and brought down an entire network of predators in the process. It started 3 years ago when I was just a freshman at Mountain View High School. My dad, Robert, was a gentle soul who worked as an accountant at a small firm downtown. He'd been devastated when my mum passed away from cancer when I was 10. For 4 years, it was just the two of us, creating our own little routine of frozen pizzas on Friday nights and hiking trips to Red Rocks on weekends. We weren't perfect, but we were healing together, finding our way through grief one day at a time. Then Margaret appeared at our church's singles ministry group. She was 42 years old, attractive in that carefully maintained way, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a wardrobe that looked like it came straight from a high-end department store. She had 2 sons from a previous marriage, Ryan, who was 16, and Tyler, who was 13. At first, she seemed like an answer to prayers I didn't even know my dad had been praying. She laughed at his accounting jokes, complimented his cooking even though we both knew he could barely manage spaghetti, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. The courtship was whirlwind fast. Within 6 months they were engaged, and Margaret and her boys were moving into our 4-bedroom colonial in the Highlands Ranch area. I remember helping her unpack boxes, feeling cautiously optimistic about having brothers for the first time. Ryan was quiet but friendly, showing me his collection of vintage baseball cards. Tyler was more outgoing, eager to explore our neighborhood and check out the nearby skate park. For about 2 weeks, everything seemed like it might actually work out. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Dad was still at work. Margaret called me into the home office she'd set up in what used to be my mum's craft room. She closed the door behind us, and her whole demeanor shifted from the warm, caring woman I'd grown to like to something colder, more calculating. "Emma," she said, settling into the leather desk chair my dad had bought her as a housewarming gift. "Now that I'm part of this family, there's something important we need to discuss. I need you to understand that I have certain expectations, particularly around productivity and making good use of your time." I nodded, thinking this was going to be some standard step-parent talk about chores or homework. But what came next was anything but standard. She pulled out a leather-bound planner and a smartphone, placing both on the desk between us. "From now on, you're going to track every hour of your day. Every single hour. You'll text me updates throughout the day about what you're doing, complete with timestamps. At the end of each day, you'll log everything into this shared family spreadsheet I've created." She turned the computer monitor toward me, showing an elaborate Excel file with tabs for each family member, though I noticed only my name was filled in. "This isn't punishment," she continued, her voice taking on that fake sweet tone I'd later come to despise. "This is about accountability and helping you develop the habits that will make you successful in life. I've read extensively about productivity optimization, and this system has been proven to work. Young people today waste so much time on their phones, on social media, just being lazy. I won't have that in my house." I remember sitting there, stunned, trying to process what she was saying. "What about Ryan and Tyler?" I asked, gesturing vaguely toward the door. "Do they have to do this too?" Margaret's smile tightened. "My sons have already been through my program. They understand the importance of productivity. You, on the other hand, need more guidance. I've noticed you spend a lot of time in your room, and frankly, your father has been too lenient with you since your mother passed. Someone needs to provide structure." The cruelty of bringing up my mum so casually took my breath away. But I was 14, confused, and my dad seemed so happy with Margaret that I didn't want to rock the boat. So I agreed, thinking maybe it wouldn't be that bad. Maybe she just wanted me to focus more on homework and less on Netflix. How wrong I was. The first day of the productivity tracking started the next morning. Margaret had printed out a detailed schedule for me, broken down into 15-minute increments. 6 a.m. wake up and make bed. Productivity score 8 out of 10. 6:15 to 6:30, shower and dress. Productivity score 7 out of 10 because showers shouldn't take that long. 6:30 to 7, breakfast and kitchen cleanup. Productivity score 9 out of 10 if I also reviewed vocabulary words while eating. She handed me a cheap Android phone, different from my regular iPhone. This is your productivity phone, she explained. You'll carry both. Your regular phone for normal teenager things, though I'll be monitoring that too, and this one specifically for updating me on your productivity status. I want real-time updates, Emma. If you're walking between classes, I want to know. If you're using the restroom, I want to know. If you're talking to friends, I want to know what about and whether it's contributing to your personal growth. That first day at school was surreal. While my friends were laughing at lunch, sharing gossip about who was dating whom, I was hunched over the Android phone, typing out messages to Margaret. 12:05 p.m., eating lunch while reading Chapter 7 of Biology textbook, combining necessary caloric intake with educational advancement. Productivity score 7.5. My best friend Sophia looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to peek at the phone. "Just something for my stepmom," I mumbled, shoving the device back in my backpack. The real horror started that evening. Margaret sat me down for what she called our first daily productivity review. She had printed out all my text messages from throughout the day, highlighted and annotated with her own comments. "I see here that you took 6 minutes to walk from English to math class," she said, tapping the paper with a manicured nail. The distance between those classrooms is approximately 200 yards. At a normal walking pace, that should take 3 minutes, 4 at most. What were you doing for those extra 2 minutes? I stammered something about crowded hallways and having to stop at my locker. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Excuses don't increase productivity, Emma. They decrease it. Stand up." Confused and starting to feel genuinely scared, I stood. She reached into a drawer and pulled out something that made my stomach drop. A leather strap about 2 feet long and an inch wide, well-worn and flexible. "This is a productivity enhancer," she said calmly. "For every hour today that you scored below a 7 in productivity, you're going to receive one reminder of why we strive for excellence." She made me bend over the desk. Through my jeans, I felt the sharp sting of leather as she brought it down 5 times. Once for each hour she'd deemed insufficiently productive. Tears sprang to my eyes, not just from the pain, but from the humiliation and shock. When it was over, she handed me a tissue and smiled that cold smile. "Tomorrow will be better, won't it? You're a smart girl, Emma. You'll learn quickly." I stumbled to my room in a daze. Part of me wanted to run straight to my dad, but he was at a client dinner and wouldn't be home until late. Besides, what would I say? That his new wife, the woman who'd brought light back into his life, had just hit me for not being productive enough. It sounded insane even to me. I curled up on my bed, pulled out my regular phone, and almost texted Sophia. But something stopped me. A small voice in my head that sounded strangely like my mother's whispered, "Document everything." That night, I took photos of the red marks on my skin. I started a private journal on my laptop, password protected and backed up to a cloud service Margaret didn't know about. I wrote down everything that had happened, every word I could remember, every detail about the leather strap and the productivity schedule. I didn't know it then, but that decision to document would eventually save not just me, but dozens of other kids trapped in similar nightmares. The next day, I tried harder. I sent updates every 15 minutes, detailed accounts of every moment of my day. 7:43 a.m. Arrived at school 3 minutes early, using time to review Spanish vocabulary. 7:56 a.m. in homeroom, organising binder for maximum efficiency in accessing class materials. 8:09 a.m. English class beginning, already have notebook open to fresh page, 3 sharpened pencils ready. But it wasn't enough. That evening's review brought new criticisms. "Your lunch period productivity score is still too low," Margaret said, studying her printed sheets like they were corporate reports. "Eating should be accomplished in 10 minutes maximum. The remaining 20 minutes should be used for studying, reading, or other self-improvement activities. Social interaction is only valuable if it's purposeful. What skills are you learning from gossip with Sophia?" She had somehow found out about my friend's name, probably from monitoring my regular phone. The hits that night were fewer, only 3, but harder. She'd found her rhythm with the strap, knowing exactly how to make it hurt without leaving marks that would last more than a day or 2. Afterwards, she hugged me, a gesture that made my skin crawl. "This is because I care about you, Emma. Your mother isn't here to guide you, but I am. I'm going to make sure you reach your full potential." The mention of my mum again made something twist inside me. My mother had been nothing like this. She'd been warm and funny, the type of person who'd declare random Tuesday nights to be pajama pizza parties just because she sensed I'd had a hard day at school. She believed in hard work, but also in joy, in balance, in the beauty of sometimes doing absolutely nothing productive at all. The thought of Margaret claiming to fill her role was obscene. Days turned into weeks, and the system became more elaborate. Margaret added new requirements almost daily. I had to submit written summaries of any conversations lasting longer than 5 minutes. If I watched TV, even educational programs, I had to write a 1-page report on what I'd learned and how it would contribute to my future success. She installed monitoring software on both my phones and my laptop, tracking every website I visited, every message I sent. Ryan and Tyler, I noticed, lived completely different lives. They came and went as they pleased, played video games for hours, had friends over without filing productivity reports. When I finally worked up the courage to ask Ryan about it, he just shrugged and looked away. "She's different with you," he mumbled. "I'm sorry." That's all he would say, but the guilt in his eyes told me he knew exactly what was happening and felt powerless to stop it. My dad, meanwhile, seemed oblivious. Margaret was careful never to criticize me or mention the productivity system in front of him. When he was home, she was the picture of maternal warmth, asking about my day, praising my grades, which had always been excellent anyway, and suggesting fun family activities. Dad, exhausted from long days at work and grateful to have help with parenting, saw only what Margaret wanted him to see. The breaking point came 3 months into the arrangement. I'd had what I thought was an incredibly productive day. I'd aced a math test, finished a history paper 2 days early, helped a classmate with her science project during lunch, and even managed to organise my closet after school while listening to an educational podcast about women in STEM. My productivity scores were all 8s and 9s. I felt confident as I sat down for the evening review. Margaret studied the logs with her usual intensity, then looked up with that disappointed expression I'd come to dread. "Emma," she said softly, "I see here that you took a 15-minute break at lunch to eat without multitasking. You recorded it as necessity for proper nutrition, but that's simply an excuse. You could have been reading, studying, or practicing a skill while eating. The human brain is capable of processing multiple inputs simultaneously." I couldn't believe it. "But I was helping Jessica with her science project," I protested. "That's productive, isn't it?" Margaret shook her head sadly. "You're missing the point. Every moment, every single moment, should be optimized. 15 minutes might not seem like much, but over a year, that's 91 hours of wasted potential. Over a lifetime, it's thousands of hours you'll never get back." The beating that night was particularly harsh. 7 strikes with the leather strap, and she made me count each one out loud, thanking her for the correction. As I limped back to my room, something inside me shifted. I realized with crystal clarity that this would never end, that no amount of productivity would ever be enough for Margaret. She didn't want me to succeed. She wanted me to suffer. But instead of breaking me, that realization ignited something else. A cold, calculated anger that would have made Margaret proud if it hadn't been directed at her. If she wanted me to be productive, if she wanted every moment documented and optimized, then I would give her exactly what she asked for and so much more. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I would follow Margaret's rules to the letter, but I would follow them so completely, so obsessively, that the system would collapse under its own weight. I started my campaign of malicious compliance with a simple text at 5:47 a.m. Good morning, Margaret. Beginning pre-wake productivity by mentally reviewing day's schedule while still in bed. Estimated productivity score 6.5 as physical body not yet in motion, but mind fully engaged. By 6 a.m., I was bombarding her with updates. 6:01 a.m., feet touching floor, experiencing productive transition from horizontal to vertical position. 6:02 a.m., walking to bathroom, counting steps for exercise tracking, 16 steps, productive use of leg muscles. 6:03 a.m., beginning morning bathroom routine. Shall I provide detailed breakdown of activities or would general summary suffice? At first, Margaret seemed pleased by my enthusiasm. She responded to my early messages with approval, even praising my initiative at that evening's review. But I was just getting started. The next day, I doubled my efforts. I sent her updates every 5 minutes, each one more detailed and ridiculous than the last. 8:23 a.m., productively blinking to maintain optimal eye moisture. Blink rate approximately 15 per minute, slightly above average due to focused reading. Productivity score 7.3. 10:45 a.m., engaging in productive oxygen exchange. Deep breathing exercise during walk to next class, increasing brain oxygenation by an estimated 12%. Productivity score 8.1. 12:16 p.m., masticating lunch in optimal pattern for digestive efficiency, chewing each bite 25 times as recommended by nutritional productivity guides. Current bite count at bite number 14 of sandwich. Productivity score 7.8. My teachers began to notice the constant phone use, but when they tried to confiscate the device, I explained it was for a family medical condition. Technically true, as Margaret's obsession was definitely pathological, and that I had documentation requiring me to maintain regular contact with my guardian. Most backed off, not wanting to get involved in what sounded like a complicated situation. The evening reviews became marathon sessions. I created PowerPoint presentations for each day, complete with pie charts showing the breakdown of my time, bar graphs comparing my productivity scores across different activities, and statistical analyses of trends in my performance. I included slides on the productivity of individual thoughts I'd had throughout the day, rating them on a scale of 1 to 10 based on their potential contribution to my future success. Slide 17, I announced one evening, clicking through my presentation while Margaret sat frozen at her desk. Analysis of productivity during minute 23 of 5th period chemistry class. While Mr. Anderson explained covalent bonds, I experienced 12 discrete thoughts. Thought number 1, understanding of electron sharing, productivity score 9.2. Thought number 2, wondering if knowledge of chemistry would help in future career, productivity score 8.6. Thought number 3, brief mental image of lunch apple, productivity score 2.1, marked down for food-related distraction. I watched Margaret's eye twitch as I continued through all 43 slides. A response I'd noticed started happening around slide 15 most nights. When she tried to interrupt, I reminded her that giving a thorough productivity review was itself a productive activity worthy of a high score. And shouldn't we strive for maximum productivity in all things? The text messages became increasingly elaborate. I started sending her photos with detailed captions. 2:13 p.m. Photograph of productive hand position while writing notes. Notice optimal grip on pencil and efficient angle of wrist. 3:47 p.m. Image of productively organized backpack. All items arranged by frequency of use and color-coded by subject matter. 7:22 p.m. Video of productive teeth brushing technique, circular motions as recommended by dental productivity guidelines. I also began requesting her input on everything, and I mean everything. Margaret, I need your productivity assessment. Should I use college-ruled or wide-ruled paper for tomorrow's English notes? Studies suggest college-ruled allows for 25% more content per page, but wide-ruled may improve handwriting legibility. Please advise with supporting productivity data. Margaret, urgent productivity question. When walking to school, is it more productive to take 843 steps on the direct route or 912 steps on the route that passes the library, allowing for brief visual exposure to educational institution? My personal favourite was when I started tracking the productivity of my digestive system. 4:32 p.m, beginning bathroom visit. Estimate 4 minutes for completion based on current digestive productivity markers. Will provide full report upon completion. 4:36 p.m, bathroom visit completed successfully. Productivity score 6.5, marked down due to failure to bring reading material. Attaching chart showing correlation between fibre intake and bathroom visit efficiency. Margaret's responses grew shorter and more strained. Fine, okay, stop sending bathroom updates. But I persisted, reminding her that she'd specifically said every moment should be tracked and that bathroom breaks were moments, weren't they? Didn't she want to ensure I was maintaining peak productivity even in life's most basic functions? The real fun began when I started involving other people. At our next family dinner with my dad present, I interrupted conversations every few minutes. Sorry, Dad, but I need to update Margaret on my current productivity. I'm chewing bite number 6 of my chicken, but I'm concerned my chewing productivity has decreased by approximately 8% since bite number 1. Margaret, should I continue with the current chewing pattern or adjust for maximum nutritional extraction? My dad looked confused. What's she talking about? He asked Margaret. Oh, just a little system we have, Margaret said quickly, her face flushing. Emma's been very enthusiastic about time management lately. Very enthusiastic, I agreed, pulling out my phone. In fact, I should document this family dinner conversation. Dad, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the productivity of your last comment? Are we using our family time efficiently, or should we implement a more structured conversation format? Margaret tried to laugh it off, but I could see my dad's brow furrowing. He'd always been slow to notice things, wrapped up in his work and his grief, but even he couldn't miss the manic edge in my voice, or the way Margaret's hands clenched around her fork every time I pulled out the productivity phone. Things escalated when Margaret's parents came to visit from Chicago. They were a pleasant older couple who clearly adored their daughter and grandsons. Over lunch on the back patio, just as everyone was relaxing with coffee and dessert, I burst through the sliding door in tears. Margaret, I sobbed loudly. I'm so sorry. I just realized that when I went to the bathroom 20 minutes ago, I didn't bring any reading material with me. That's 3 whole minutes of unproductive time. I'm such a failure, just like you always say. The silence was deafening. Margaret's mother, a silver-haired woman named Dorothy, slowly set down her coffee cup. What did you just say, dear? She asked, her voice careful and controlled. I pulled out the leather strap from behind my back, where I'd hidden it before my dramatic entrance. I brought this so you can correct me properly. 7 strikes for 7 unproductive hours this week, right, Margaret? That's the rule. I can't learn without proper consequences. Margaret went white as a sheet. Emma, that's not. We don't. Her voice faltered as she met her mother's horrified gaze. It's not what it looks like, she finally managed. Dorothy stood up, her voice shaking with rage. What is that thing? Why does this child have a strap? What do you mean, correct her? My dad, who'd been frozen in shock, suddenly came alive. Margaret, what the hell is going on? Before Margaret could spin some lie, I pulled out my regular phone. "I have photos," I announced. "Of the bruises, I mean. I've been productively documenting everything like Margaret taught me. Should I show them? I've organised them chronologically and by severity. Very productive record-keeping." Margaret's father, Bill, a retired police officer, held out his hand. "Show me," he said quietly. I handed him my phone, already queued up to the album I'd carefully maintained for months. His face grew darker with each swipe. "Bob," he said to my dad, his voice deadly calm, "I think you need to see this." As my dad looked through the photos, his expression transformed from confusion to horror, to a rage I'd never seen before. The man who hadn't raised his voice since my mum's funeral stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Get out," he said to Margaret, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my house right now." Margaret tried to salvage the situation. "You don't understand," she said desperately. "Emma's been manipulating this whole situation. She's troubled. She needs structure." "The strap." Dorothy's voice cut through her daughter's excuses. "You hit this child with a strap, like some kind of animal?" Margaret's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. "She was wasting her life," she snapped. "Someone had to teach her discipline. Her mother was dead, and her father clearly wasn't going to do it." The slap Dorothy delivered to her daughter echoed across the patio. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you invoke that child's dead mother to justify your abuse?" Bill was already on the phone with someone, probably his old police contacts. My dad had his arm around me, holding me close like he was afraid I might disappear. Ryan and Tyler, who'd been hiding inside, watched through the window with expressions of relief mixed with fear. The rest of that afternoon was a blur of hushed conversations and urgent phone calls. Margaret left with just her purse, her parents following in their rental car after apologising profusely to me and my dad. Ryan and Tyler stayed with us, too afraid and confused to go with their mother. The barbecue ended with everyone making excuses to leave early, but I didn't care. I'd won the first battle in what I was beginning to realise would be a much longer war. That night, my dad sat on the edge of my bed, looking broken. "I'm so sorry, baby girl," he whispered, using the pet name he hadn't said since Mom died. "I failed you. I brought that monster into our home, and I didn't protect you." "It's not your fault," I told him, meaning it. She was very good at hiding who she really was. We held each other and cried, both for what had happened and for the mother who would have never let it happen in the first place. The next morning brought a new crisis. I was called to the guidance counsellor's office first thing, where Mr. Peterson, a man who always seemed to stand too close and smile too much, was waiting with a stern expression. "Emma," he said without preamble, "I need you to roll up your sleeves." When I hesitated, he grabbed my arm and yanked up the fabric himself, revealing the fading bruises from Margaret's strap. "Your stepmother called me this morning," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "She's worried about you, says your father has been getting increasingly violent. These bruises confirm her concerns." My blood ran cold as I realised what was happening. Margaret wasn't going down without a fight, and she'd fired the first shot in her counterattack. "No," I said, pulling my arm back. "You don't understand. These bruises are from Margaret. She's been hitting me with a leather strap. She's the one who's been abusing me." Mr. Peterson shook his head condescendingly. "That's not what she told me. She has detailed documentation of your father's violent outbursts. She's been keeping records for months out of concern for your safety." My hands started shaking as the full scope of Margaret's plan became clear. She'd been preparing for this possibility all along, creating a false narrative that painted my gentle, grieving father as an abuser. "It's all lies," I insisted. "Margaret made all of that up. She's trying to steal custody of me. That's what abuse victims often say," Mr. Peterson replied, in that patronising tone adults use when they think children are too stupid to understand their own lives. They protect their abusers, especially when it's a parent. He picked up his phone. I'm mandated to report this. I've already called Child Protective Services based on your stepmother's concerns. They'll be here within the hour. The room spun as I processed his words. You called them before even talking to me, I asked, incredulous. Your stepmother provided very compelling evidence, he said, pulling out a folder. She's been documenting your father's behavior for months. She's clearly a very concerned parent. I snatched the folder before he could stop me, flipping through pages of Margaret's neat handwriting. Every entry was a lie, a carefully crafted fiction. October 15th, Robert grabbed Emma's arm roughly when she tried to leave for school, leaving red marks. November 2nd, overheard Robert yelling at Emma for staying up past bedtime, used profanity and threatened consequences. November 18th, Emma flinched when Robert raised his hand to gesture, clear sign of physical abuse pattern. This is all fake, I said, throwing the folder back on his desk. None of this happened. She made up every single word. Look at these bruises. They're from a strap, not hands. Look at the pattern. Mr. Peterson barely glanced at my arms. Those could be from anything, he said dismissively. Your stepmother mentioned you've been self-harming for attention. It's a common cry for help in abusive situations. Before I could respond, the door opened and two people in suits entered, a woman with her hair in a tight bun and a younger man carrying a tablet. We're from Child Protective Services, the woman announced. We need to speak with Emma privately. The next hour was a nightmare of leading questions and willful misunderstanding. Every time I tried to explain about Margaret's productivity obsession and the beatings, they exchanged knowing looks and made notes on their tablets. They'd already decided what the truth was before they even walked in. We'll need to remove you from your father's home while we investigate, the woman finally announced. It's just temporary for your safety. Where will I go? I asked, already dreading the answer. Your stepmother's sister, Samantha, has graciously agreed to take you in, she replied. She lives nearby and can maintain your school enrollment. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Margaret's sister? You can't be serious. This is exactly what Margaret planned. She's trying to get custody of me. These are very serious allegations against your father, the man said sternly. Your stepmother is just trying to protect you. The fact that you're so resistant suggests you may be suffering from trauma bonding with your abuser. Within 2 hours, I was in the back of a CPS vehicle with a garbage bag full of hastily packed clothes. My phone had been confiscated to prevent me from being influenced by my father. I later learned they'd shown up at his accounting firm with a police escort, removing him in front of all his colleagues and clients, destroying his reputation in minutes. Samantha's house was a pristine 2-story in an upscale neighborhood. She greeted me at the door with the same fake smile her sister had perfected. "Oh, you poor thing," she cooed. "Don't worry, you're safe now. No one will hurt you here." The threat in her words was subtle but clear. Play along or things would get worse. The first few days at Samantha's were surreal. She maintained the charade of being a caring guardian, making elaborate meals and asking about school with feigned interest. But her questions always circled back to my father. Had he ever lost his temper? Did he drink? Had he ever made me feel unsafe? I gave monosyllabic answers, refusing to play into their trap. On the 4th night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, too perfect, like a stage set waiting for the next act. I crept downstairs for water and heard voices from the living room. My heart stopped when I recognized Margaret's laugh. Curiosity overrode caution, and I pressed myself against the wall to listen. "He's already got a lawyer," Margaret was saying, "but it won't matter. I have months of documentation, plus the mandated reporter at the school. The social worker is eating out of my hand. She thinks Emma's in complete denial about the abuse." "Perfect," Samantha replied. "I told her today that Emma seems withdrawn and flinches when my husband walks into the room. Classic abuse victim behavior, right?" "That's exactly right," Margaret confirmed. "Keep documenting everything. Make sure to mention nightmares, hoarding food, any sign of trauma you can think of or invent. I'm filing for emergency custody next week. I covered my mouth to muffle my gasp. They were manufacturing evidence together, building a case that would not only keep me from my dad, but potentially send him to prison. I crept back upstairs, my mind racing. I needed proof of their conspiracy, but how? My phone was gone, and Samantha watched me constantly. The next day at school, I pulled my friend Sophia aside during lunch. "I need your help," I whispered urgently, explaining everything that had happened. Sophia's eyes widened in horror. She immediately offered me her old phone, a battered iPhone she'd kept as a backup. That evening, I hid the phone in my backpack and left it recording in the living room before excusing myself to do homework upstairs. Like clockwork, Margaret showed up after dinner. The recording captured everything, their entire conspiracy laid out in their own words. "She's going to crack eventually," Margaret said confidently. "Kids always do. And when she admits that Robert hit her, even once, I'll have everything I need." "But what if she doesn't?" Samantha asked. "We'll keep applying pressure," Margaret replied. "I have a friend who works at the school, Miss Rodriguez. She's been pulling Emma out of classes for counselling sessions, working on breaking down her defences. Sooner or later, she'll say what we need her to say." Over the next 2 weeks, I recorded 3 more conversations. Each one provided more evidence of their scheme. Margaret discussed coaching witnesses, fabricating incidents, and even mentioned other families she'd targeted in the past. "This isn't my first rodeo," she laughed during one recording. "Though I'll admit Emma's father is being more difficult than the others. The Petersons practically handed over their kids after I planted some drugs in the father's car. My supervised visits with my dad were heartbreaking. We met once a week at the CPS office with a social worker watching our every interaction. Dad looked like he'd aged a decade, his face gaunt and his hands trembling. The first time I saw him, he broke down completely. 'I'm so sorry, baby girl,' he whispered. 'I should have protected you. I should have seen what she was doing.' 'Listen to me,' I said quietly, glancing at the social worker who was pretending to read a magazine. 'I have proof. Margaret and Samantha are working together. They're framing you.' I slipped him the USB drive I'd hidden in my shoe, containing all the recordings I'd managed to make. 'Everything's on there. Please just give it to your lawyer.' His eyes widened with hope, the first real emotion besides despair I'd seen since this nightmare began. 'My brave girl,' he whispered, 'just like your mum, always thinking 3 steps ahead.' Meanwhile, my friends at school had rallied around me. When they learned what was happening, they created a shared document called The Truth About Margaret, where they compiled their observations from the past months. Sophia wrote about finding me crying in the bathroom after Margaret had sent 43 texts during a single math class demanding productivity updates. Jake, from my chemistry class, described seeing bruises on my arms and how I'd flinched when he'd raised his hand for a high five. Mrs. Chen, my English teacher, contributed a statement about how my creative writing had turned dark and anxious after Margaret entered my life, with recurring themes of trapped protagonists and inescapable surveillance. The preliminary custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after my removal from home. Margaret showed up looking every inch the concerned mother in a conservative navy suit and pearl earrings. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as she testified about her desperate attempts to provide structure for a troubled teenager acting out after her mother's death. The productivity system, she claimed, was recommended by a parenting expert to help me develop better habits. She presented the tracking spreadsheets as evidence of her dedication, conveniently leaving out the punishment component. My dad's lawyer tried to introduce our evidence, but Margaret's attorney dismissed it immediately. These are clearly fabricated recordings, probably created by the father to coach his daughter. And these statements from teenagers. Children will say anything to protect a friend, especially one who's being manipulated by an abusive parent. The judge, an elderly man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, seemed inclined to agree. The system was designed to believe mothers, to protect children from dangerous fathers, and Margaret was exploiting every bias and assumption. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dad's lawyer had been doing deep research and discovered this wasn't Margaret's first time playing this game. She'd been married twice before, both times to single fathers with children. Both marriages had ended with her attempting to gain custody through abuse allegations. One of those children, now 23 and living in Portland, agreed to testify via video link. His name was David, and his testimony was devastating. "She did exactly the same thing to me," he said, his voice steady but pained. The productivity tracking started about 3 months after she married my dad. The beatings followed soon after. When my father started to catch on, she called CPS with false allegations. I spent 6 months in foster care before the truth came out. By then, she'd cleaned out their joint accounts and disappeared. Margaret's lawyer objected strenuously, but the judge allowed the testimony. For the first time, doubt crept into his eyes as he studied Margaret. "Do you know this young man?" he asked her directly. Margaret's composure slipped for just a moment. That was a different situation entirely," she stammered. "David's father actually was abusive. I was trying to protect that child." David's laugh was bitter. She said the exact same things then that she's saying now. She even used the same phrases about providing structure and helping troubled children reach their potential. "Check the court records, Your Honor. You'll see the patterns." But the real turning point came when my grandmother arrived at the next hearing. Unbeknownst to everyone, she'd been visiting from Florida and had installed a security system at our house just weeks before the infamous barbecue confrontation. Her neighbour was a tech enthusiast who'd helped her set up cameras that partially captured our backyard. Grandma Helen, a 70-year-old force of nature who'd raised 3 kids on her own after Grandpa died, marched into court with a USB drive and the fierce protectiveness of a grandmother scorned. "I've been watching this woman hurt my granddaughter for months," she announced to the courtroom, "and I have proof." The footage was grainy but clear enough. You could see me approaching Margaret during the barbecue, my body language screaming fear and submission, not the defiance of a manipulative teenager. You could see Margaret's face change when I mentioned the bruises, the flash of panic before she tried to leave. Most importantly, you could see her family's genuine shock and horror at the revelation. "Play it again," the judge ordered, leaning forward in his seat. "This time, focus on the defendant's reaction when the bruises are mentioned." The courtroom watched in silence as Margaret's mask slipped in real time on the screen. The way she immediately tried to flee, the way her own mother recoiled from her, the way her father, a former cop, immediately started making phone calls. These weren't the reactions of an innocent woman being falsely accused. Margaret tried one last desperate play. She claimed I was mentally disturbed, that the bruises were self-inflicted, that I'd orchestrated the entire scene for attention. But Dad's lawyer was ready with my medical records from the past year. "Would you like to explain, Ms. Williams, why none of Emma's regular checkups noted any signs of self-harm? Why her teachers only began reporting concerning behaviour after you entered her life? Why her grief counsellor, who saw her for 2 years after her mother's death, noted that she was well-adjusted and healing appropriately until exactly 3 months ago?" The teacher testimony was particularly damning. Mrs. Chen, my English teacher, took the stand and described in detail how I'd gone from an engaged, creative student to someone who constantly checked her phone and seemed perpetually anxious. "She used to write these beautiful stories about adventure and friendship," Mrs. Chen said. "After October, everything became dark. Characters trapped in prisons they couldn't see, being watched by invisible eyes. It was clearly a cry for help." My PE teacher, Coach Martinez, testified about finding me doing homework during lunch period. When I asked her why she wasn't eating with her friends, she said she couldn't waste time, that every minute had to be productive. She looked terrified, like something bad would happen if she was caught relaxing. It broke my heart. The final blow to Margaret's case came when the judge decided to examine the productivity logs more carefully. My dad's lawyer had spent hours analysing them and found something brilliant. The timestamps showed Margaret somehow knowing exactly what I was doing during school hours, even when she couldn't possibly have been observing me. Ms. Williams, the judge asked directly, can you explain how you knew Emma was being, quote, unproductive, unquote, at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when she was in school and you were presumably at work? Margaret's carefully constructed story began to unravel. She claimed I was texting her updates, but the phone records showed that wasn't true. She'd been tracking me through other means, possibly illegally installed apps or informants at the school. These timestamps suggest either you required a child to constantly lie about her activities, or you had some method of surveilling her that you haven't disclosed to this court, the judge said sternly. Either option is deeply troubling and suggests a level of control that goes far beyond normal parental supervision. Then came the shock that changed everything. Ryan and Tyler, who'd been living with their aunt since the barbecue incident, asked to address the court. They'd been silent throughout the proceedings, and everyone assumed they were too traumatized or too loyal to their mother to speak. But Tyler, the younger one, stood up with shaking hands and a determined expression. She makes us lie, he said quietly. Mom told us to say Emma was violent with us, but she never was. She never even raised her voice. Mom hits us too, just not as much because we're her real kids. The courtroom erupted. Margaret shot to her feet. Baby, you're confused, she pleaded. You don't understand what you're saying. Yes, we do, Ryan interrupted, standing beside his brother. We're tired of lying. We're tired of watching you hurt people. We're tired of being afraid. He pulled out his phone and showed the judge photos. These are from last year, before Emma and her dad. She did the same thing to us until we learned to fake our productivity reports, to lie convincingly enough that she'd leave us alone. The case collapsed entirely. The judge ordered an immediate investigation into Margaret for child abuse, filing false reports and perjury. His ruling was scathing. This court finds that Margaret Williams has engaged in a systematic campaign of child abuse, followed by an elaborate attempt to frame an innocent man and steal his child. The emotional and psychological torture inflicted on Emma Davidson is among the most calculated and cruel this court has encountered. I was returned home that same day. Dad and I sat at our kitchen table that night, sharing Chinese takeout and trying to process everything that had happened. We didn't talk much, just sat in comfortable silence, grateful to be together again. The house felt different without Margaret's oppressive presence, lighter somehow, like windows had been opened after a long winter, but our relief was short-lived. That evening, Dad's phone rang. His lawyer's voice was grim. Margaret's filed a civil suit. She's claiming defamation, emotional distress, and damages. She says you and Emma conspired to humiliate her at the barbecue and destroy her reputation. She's asking for $200,000. I laughed, actually laughed, because what else could I do? Of course she wasn't done. Predators like Margaret never just slink away in defeat. They escalate, they retaliate, they find new ways to inflict pain. Dad's face was pale as he hung up. We can't afford this, he said quietly. The criminal defense already cost everything I had saved. I might have to take out a second mortgage. The next few weeks were a blur of legal documents and mounting bills. Margaret's civil suit was even more vindictive than we'd expected. She claimed we'd orchestrated an elaborate conspiracy to destroy her life, that the bruises were self-inflicted as part of our plan, that we'd coached Ryan and Tyler to lie. Her lawyer filed motion after motion, each requiring expensive responses from our lawyer. But Margaret had underestimated the power of truth and the fury of a grandmother scorned. Grandma Helen flew back from Florida and took charge. She liquidated some of her retirement savings to help with legal fees and started her own investigation into Margaret's past. If this woman has done this before, she reasoned, there have to be other victims. We just need to find them. What we found was a pattern of abuse spanning 15 years and multiple states. Margaret had a type, widowed or divorced fathers with children, preferably daughters. She'd join support groups for single parents, present herself as a caring, structured woman who could help heal their broken families and then systematically destroy them from within. Using social media, court records, and good old-fashioned detective work, we identified 4 other families with stories eerily similar to ours. There was Sarah in Arizona, whose ex-husband had married a woman named Margaret, who'd subjected Sarah's daughters to productivity tracking before filing false abuse allegations. The Hendersons in Nevada, where Margaret had gone by Peggy, same system, same leather strap, same false accusations when the father started questioning her methods. The Chen family in California, where she'd been Maggie Chen after marrying a widowed Chinese-American father, adapting her abuse to include cultural shame about academic performance. Each family had fought their battles alone, thinking they were isolated incidents. None of them knew about the others until we connected them. Sarah was the first to agree to testify in our civil case. When she heard our story over a video call, she broke down crying. She did the exact same thing, word for word, Sarah said. The productivity tracking, the beatings, the CPS calls. I lost my daughters for a year. By the time I got them back, they were different, broken. They still have nightmares. The civil case took a different turn when our lawyer filed to add these witnesses. Margaret's attorney fought viciously to exclude their testimony, but the judge, a younger woman named Judge Martinez, who'd actually worked in family services before law school, saw through the objections. If the plaintiff has engaged in this pattern of behavior multiple times, it speaks directly to her credibility and the merit of her claims, Judge Martinez ruled. I'll allow the testimony. Margaret's carefully maintained facade began to crack. She fired her first lawyer and hired a more aggressive one, but the damage was mounting. Local news picked up the story of a serial abuse pattern targeting single-parent families. Other victims began coming forward. The principal at my school quietly admitted that Margaret had tried to get Miss Rodriguez hired specifically to have an ally in the building. The investigation revealed that they'd known each other from a previous school district where similar allegations had been made. During a particularly brutal deposition, Margaret was confronted with evidence from all 5 families. Her responses were chilling in their narcissism. Those children needed structure, she insisted. Their parents were failing them. I was the only one who cared enough to hold them accountable. When asked about the leather strap, she called it a traditional disciplinary tool that had been used for generations. These soft modern parents don't understand that children need consequences. But it was her own son's testimony that truly destroyed her case. In a closed session with a child psychologist, they revealed years of manipulation and abuse. Ryan described being forced to maintain fake productivity logs, showing his biological father as neglectful, helping Margaret build her custody case years earlier. Tyler talked about the fear that permeated their lives, never knowing what would trigger their mother's rage, learning to lie reflexively to protect themselves. The civil trial became a criminal matter when the FBI got involved. The pattern of crossing state lines to target families, the forged documents, the conspiracy with school employees, it all pointed to a larger operation. As investigators dug deeper, they found evidence that Margaret wasn't working alone. She was part of an informal network of individuals who shared tactics for gaining custody of children from single parents. The network operated through private forums and encrypted messaging apps. They called themselves child advocates and claimed to be saving children from unfit parents. In reality, they were predators who'd found a way to weaponize the family court system for financial gain and psychological control. Margaret had received payments from several wealthy members for coaching them through the process of stealing children. The trial made national news. Dozens of families came forward with similar stories. The FBI discovered training materials that Margaret had created, complete with templates for false abuse documentation, strategies for manipulating CPS workers, and psychological profiles of ideal targets. She'd turned child abuse into a systematic business model. Margaret's mental state deteriorated as the evidence mounted. During one court session, she exploded at the judge, screaming that we were all conspirators trying to destroy a woman who only wanted to help broken families. She had to be physically restrained and removed from the courtroom. Her own lawyer tried to mount an insanity defense, but psychological evaluations showed she knew exactly what she was doing. She simply believed she had the right to do it. The final verdict was decisive. Margaret was found guilty on multiple federal charges, including conspiracy, fraud, and crossing state lines to commit child abuse. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. As they led her away in shackles, she turned to look at me one last time. Instead of hatred or rage, her expression was blank, empty, like a mask with nothing behind it. But the story didn't end with Margaret's conviction. The network she'd been part of scattered, but didn't disappear. Other victims reached out, sharing their stories, warning about similar predators still operating. We realized that Margaret was just one tentacle of a much larger monster that fed on vulnerable families. Dad and I threw ourselves into advocacy work. We started a non-profit called Protecting Family Truths that provided resources for families targeted by false allegations. The website included warning signs to watch for, legal resources, and a secure forum for victims to connect and share evidence. Within 6 months, we had over 1,000 registered members from across the country. I spoke at conferences about recognizing predatory patterns in potential step-parents. The productivity tracking system, I explained to a room full of social workers, isn't about productivity. It's about control, about breaking down a child's sense of self until they don't trust their own perceptions. When someone tells you they're helping you become your best self while systematically destroying you, that's not discipline. That's abuse. The work was exhausting but necessary. Every week brought new emails from desperate parents and terrified children. A teenage boy in Maine whose stepfather had started a similar system but with military-style punishments. A girl in Texas whose stepmother documented every bite of food she ate, claiming it was for health purposes while starving her. Twin boys in Oregon whose father's girlfriend made them compete against each other for productivity scores, with the loser forced to sleep in the garage. Each story broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. We couldn't save everyone, but we could provide tools and hope. We partnered with legal aid organizations to provide free representation for families who couldn't afford lawyers. We worked with legislators to close loopholes in custody laws that predators exploited. We trained CPS workers to recognize the difference between real abuse and manufactured allegations. 2 years after Margaret's conviction, I was accepted to Stanford University to study law with a focus on child advocacy. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday, and Dad and I celebrated with pizza and root beer floats, just like we used to with Mom. As we sat on the couch, surrounded by college brochures and legal textbooks, Dad raised his glass in a toast. To Emma, who turned the worst chapter of our lives into a mission to protect others. Your mum would be so proud. I thought about Mom often during those years. How she would have seen through Margaret immediately. How her warmth and genuine love stood in such stark contrast to Margaret's calculated manipulation. In a strange way, experiencing Margaret's abuse had given me a deeper appreciation for the unconditional love I'd known for the first 10 years of my life. Real parental love doesn't require spreadsheets or productivity scores. It doesn't demand perfection or threaten consequences for being human. It simply exists, constant and unwavering, even after death. The work continued to grow. Sarah, the first mother we'd connected with, became our chief operating officer, bringing her business acumen and survivor's perspective to the organization. Ryan and Tyler, now legally adopted by their paternal grandmother, became peer counselors for other children escaping abusive situations. Even Grandma Helen got involved, leading a support group for grandparents fighting for their grandchildren's safety. We faced pushback, of course. Margaret's supporters, and she still had some, created websites claiming we were destroying innocent women, trying to bring structure to chaotic families. They filed lawsuits, made threats, tried to discredit our work. But for every attack, 10 more survivors stepped forward to share their truth. The movement had grown beyond any one person or story. It had become a chorus of voices refusing to be silenced. One autumn evening, as I was preparing for a presentation at a national conference on family law, I received an unexpected call. It was from the federal prison where Margaret was serving her sentence. My hands shook as I debated whether to accept the call. Curiosity won. Margaret's voice was different, older, tired. "I know you hate me," she began. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt nothing, and that scared me more than if I'd felt rage or even satisfaction." Margaret continued, "I've been thinking about my life, about the patterns. My mother did similar things to me, you know. Not an excuse, just a fact. Cycles of abuse, generations of damage. You broke the cycle, Emma. You were stronger than any of us." The call ended with neither forgiveness nor condemnation, just acknowledgement. Margaret died 4 months later. I didn't attend the funeral, but Ryan and Tyler did. They needed closure in a way I didn't. They told me later that only a handful of people came, mostly family members who looked ashamed to be there. The network she'd been part of had abandoned her the moment she became a liability. Her death brought an unexpected revelation. Her personal effects included journals dating back 20 years, documenting not just her crimes, but her own childhood trauma. Her mother had subjected her to similar treatment, productivity tracking using handwritten ledgers, beatings for imperfection, emotional manipulation disguised as love. The cycle had started long before Margaret, passed down like a cursed heirloom. I shared this information at our next conference, not to excuse Margaret, but to illustrate the importance of breaking these cycles. Hurt people, I told the audience, but that hurt has to stop somewhere. It stops when we refuse to accept abuse as discipline, when we recognize that love doesn't require suffering, when we protect the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. It stops with us. 5 years after that nightmare summer, our organization had helped over 3,000 families. We'd successfully advocated for changes in custody laws in 12 states. We'd trained thousands of social workers, teachers, and law enforcement officers to recognize predatory patterns. The work was far from over. New predators emerged constantly, finding innovative ways to exploit legal systems and family vulnerabilities. But we'd built an army of survivors and advocates ready to fight back. I graduated from law school and joined a firm specializing in family protection law. Dad remarried, this time to a wonderful woman named Patricia, who'd never even heard of productivity tracking and thought the idea of monitoring children's every moment was insane. They had a daughter together, my little sister Grace, who grew up in a house full of laughter and reasonable bedtimes, and the radical notion that children deserve to exist without constantly proving their worth. On what would have been my mother's 50th birthday, Dad and I visited her grave together. We brought yellow roses, her favourites, and stood in comfortable silence for a while. I told her about the law practice, about the families we'd helped, about Grace learning to read using the same books Mom had read to me. I told her about the nightmares that still came sometimes, about the way I still felt phantom buzzes from a productivity phone that had been destroyed years ago. But mostly, I told her about hope. As we walked back to the car, Dad took my hand. "You know what I think your mum would say if she were here?" he asked. I smiled, already knowing. She'd say she's proud of me, but also that I'm working too hard and need to take a vacation. Dad laughed, the sound carrying across the cemetery like music. Exactly. She'd probably prescribe an immediate dose of doing absolutely nothing productive for at least a week. That night, I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and did something I hadn't done in years. Nothing. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset, not documenting it, not analysing its productivity value, not creating a spreadsheet of colour variations. Just existing in the moment, unproductive and free. It was the most revolutionary act I could imagine, and somewhere in the gentle evening breeze, I could almost hear my mother's approval. Looking back now, 10 years after that first productivity log, I can see how Margaret inadvertently gave me my life's purpose. She meant to break me, to turn me into a compliance machine that would never question authority or trust my own perceptions. Instead, she created an advocate who questions everything, who recognizes manipulation in all its forms, and who fights for those still trapped in their own spreadsheet prisons. The irony would probably kill her if she weren't already dead. But this story isn't really about Margaret, or even about me. It's about the thousands of children right now living under similar systems of control, believing that love comes with spreadsheets and leather straps. It's about the parents fighting against false allegations, while the real abusers hide behind paperwork and manipulation. It's about breaking cycles that have persisted for generations, choosing healing over harm, truth over convenient lies. Every night before bed, I look at a photo on my nightstand. It's from my 9th birthday, the last one with Mom. We're covered in cake and frosting, laughing at something off camera, completely unproductive in our joy. Next to it sits a printed email from a girl named Katie in Wisconsin, whose stepfather had started making her track her productivity. She found our website, reached out for help, and escaped before the beatings could begin. "Thank you for saving my life," her email says. "Now I know what love is supposed to look like. That's my productivity report, the only one that matters. Lives saved, families protected, cycles broken. No spreadsheet required, no leather strap needed. Just the simple, revolutionary act of believing children deserve childhoods, that love doesn't require suffering, and that some things in life are too precious to measure." Margaret would hate it. Mum would be so proud. And in the end, that's the only metric I need. As I finish writing this story, sharing it with you in hopes that it might help someone recognize the warning signs or find the courage to seek help, I want to leave you with this thought. If someone claims to love you while systematically destroying you, that's not love. If someone demands you prove your worth through constant productivity and performance, that's not guidance, that's control, and you deserve so much better than that. To all the Emmas out there, trapped in their own productivity nightmares, documenting their days while losing their souls, know this. Your worth is not measured in spreadsheets. Your value doesn't decrease with rest. You are not required to optimize every moment of your existence for someone else's satisfaction. You're allowed to be human, flawed and unproductive, and gloriously free. The leather strap they wield has no power once you realize you don't deserve it. The spreadsheet becomes meaningless when you refuse to fill it in. And to the Margarets of the world, the predators who see vulnerability as opportunity, who disguise abuse as structure and control as care, we see you now. We know your patterns, recognize your tactics, document your crimes. The system you manipulated is learning to protect against you. The children you would target are being taught to trust their instincts and speak their truths. Your time is ending, one prosecution, one protection order, one saved child at a time. The last entry in my productivity log, written 10 years ago as I sat in my childhood bedroom, finally free from Margaret's shadow, reads simply this. 11:43 p.m. Decided to heal instead of hurt. Chose truth over manipulation. Learned that love doesn't require documentation. Productivity score immeasurable. Status complete. And with that, I closed the spreadsheet forever and began the beautiful, messy, unproductive work of living.